Wasted trillions, Bolshevist echoes in modern regulations. We're tackling something that's quietly eating away at the heart of what makes economies thrive. The endless web of rules and requirements that governments pile on businesses, especially that mandatory gathering and reporting of all sorts of stats. The stuff where companies have to track every little detail on employees, environment, finances, and hand it over just because some bureaucrat says so. It's like a slow poison for creativity and efficiency. And by the end of this, you'll see why it's holding us all back. Before we dig deeper into this look at how regulations choke off innovation and growth, a quick note. If something here hits home, maybe a key stat on wasted billions or the real drag on jobs, think about liking and sharing this episode, and make sure you're following for more. Your support keeps us going with these eye-opening discussions. First off, picture this. You're running a small outfit, maybe a tech startup or a local manufacturer, and instead of pouring your energy into building the next big thing or streamlining your operations, you're drowning in paperwork. Forms, reports, audits, all to collect data that might never even get used. It's not just annoying, it's a real drag on growth. Across the West, from the US to Europe, this kind of overreach is everywhere, turning what should be a free-flowing market into a tangled mess. We've got economies that could be booming, but they're stuck in neutral because resources are funneled into compliance instead of breakthroughs. It's a story of good intentions gone wrong, where the push for more control ends up crushing the very progress it's supposed to protect. Now, let's get into the meat of it, the hard numbers and real-world hits. In the US alone, the total tab for keeping up with all these regs runs about $2 trillion a year, roughly 7% of the whole GDP. That's not pocket change. It's a massive chunk that's siphoned off from actual productive work. Break it down, and businesses are shelling out anywhere from $78 billion to $239 billion just on labor for compliance. People whose jobs are basically ticking boxes instead of making stuff or solving problems. And mandatory stats collection? That's a big slice of it. Firms have to log employment figures, environmental impacts, financial metrics, all without any direct payoff for them. It's like being forced to keep a diary for the government while your competitors in less regulated spots are racing ahead. Over in Europe, it's even heavier. The EU's administrative burdens hit €150 to €350 billion annually, 3 to 5% of GDP. GDPR, that big data privacy rule, jacked up costs by 20% and slashed venture funding for small players by millions weekly. In places like the Netherlands, it's 3.6% of GDP just for paperwork. And the UK, they're looking at £25 billion a year on tax compliance alone, plus billions more from new rules. These aren't abstract. They're real dollars vanishing into the void. If we could cut this stuff in half, productivity could jump 8% in some spots. That's huge for growth. Jobs take a beating too. Regulations act like a tax on profits, about 2.6%, which scares off new firms and limits expansion. In the US, it's led to 1.6 million fewer jobs over 5 years from health mandates alone, and broader stats show 1.2 million jobs not created due to downward revisions tied to uncertainty. Europe sees similar pain. Stricter rules drop entrepreneurship, creating valleys where firms avoid growing past 50 employees to dodge more reporting. Overall, across OECD nations, this accumulation slows GDP growth by 0.33 to 1.5 points a year, meaning millions of potential jobs just evaporate. Small businesses, the ones that create 60 to 70% of new gigs, get hammered hardest. Barriers like a 45% effective tariff on intra-EU trade have their scale and kill opportunities. By sector, it's uneven but brutal. Manufacturing eats 2.3% of labor costs on this, with 19.5% of total burdens in some countries. Input prices spike, innovation drops 5 to 20%, and we've seen 78,000 job losses in the US recently. Finance and insurance? Up to 3.3%, with GDPR adding $750 million a year for big US firms in Europe. Retail's at 0.8%, but still faces product safety data rules leading to massive revisions. Healthcare's hit with 4.4%, where mandates wipe out 1.6 million jobs. Construction and utilities aren't far behind, with permits and environmental stats slowing everything. Company size makes it worse. Micro and small firms under 50 employees pay $7,000 to $10,000 per head in the US, €10,000 to €50,000 in Europe. That's 69 to 100% more than big players. They make up over half the burdens because fixed costs crush them. No fancy compliance teams, just owners losing sleep over forms. Medium firms, 50 to 249, peak at 3.3% of wages, hitting regulatory cliffs that make scaling a nightmare. Large ones, 250 plus, absorb it better at 1 to 2%, but still fork over millions absolute, like $430 million per firm for digital rules. Diving deeper into why this happens, the core issues boil down to distortion and diversion. Rules accumulate like barnacles on a ship, slowing everything down. They twist investment choices. Instead of pumping cash into R&D or new tech, firms divert to lawyers and accountants. That's why productivity growth's tanked since the 90s. Weak investments, fewer startups scaling up, resources stuck in low output spots. Higher compliance links to 0.5% less output per hour and fewer young firms employing people. It's a gradual build-up, but over decades, it's shaved nearly a point off annual GDP growth, leaving economies $4 trillion smaller than they could be. Uncertainty's a killer too. Social regs on environment or health create fog around approvals, making managers shy away from risks. Take biotech. Precautionary principles have gutted innovation in genetically modified stuff, with firms slashing investments after decades of re-evaluating old chemicals. Economic regs limit experimentation and market contesting, favoring big incumbents who lobby for barriers that squash newcomers. As capture at work, established players twist rules to protect turf, turning entrepreneurs from market creators into political gamers. That shifts culture from innovation to politics, eroding dynamism. Mandatory stats amp this up. It's not just collection. It's verification, submission, all unrelated to core business. In Europe, regulatory tasks eat 3.9% of employment, up from 3.7%. That's 4.2% of US wages, $521 billion or 1.8% GDP. High-wage hours, 20 to 30%, go to this nonsense. Have it, and boom, 8% productivity gain. But instead, it localizes economies, restricts global play, and in a world needing agility, it's a straitjacket. This isn't about ditching all oversight. Some standards prevent real harms. But when rules dictate how instead of what, they coerce control, mimicking Bolshevist central planning that kills free market vibrancy. Government creeping into business decisions, even owning stakes indirectly, prioritizes politics over customers. In historical terms, think back to post-war eras where lighter hands sparked booms. Heavy ones led to stagnation, like in command economies. Pulling from the trenches, the accumulation of regulations over time stifles innovation and productivity growth, and as a result, slows economic growth overall. Or this, regulations have a negative impact on small firms, especially in industries with high lobbying expenditures, and regulatory compliance costs are linked to workers producing less per hour and to new businesses making up a smaller share of employment. One more, the buildup of more and more federal regulations over time distorted business investment decisions, which, in the long run, are the drivers of innovation and productivity growth. Wrapping this up, if we want real progress, it's time to rethink. Push for performance-based rules over rigid dictates, digitize to cut admin, and regularly scrub outdated junk. Exempt small firms more, focus mandates on essentials. A regulatory reset could boost GDP 1.5% in the EU alone. Free markets thrive on flexibility. Let's clear the path so innovation and jobs can flourish again. Stay unregulated. Stay free.